Now to Local Matters Campaign 2018. Nevada voters will head to the polls tomorrow for the state's primary election, setting up who will face off in November. Hillary Clinton won the state in 2016 during the presidential election. Jon Ralston is the editor of the Nevada Independent. He joins me now from Vegas. Jon, thank you for joining us. I want to start off with Senator Dean Heller, if you will. He's the only GOP senator seeking re-election in a state that was actually won by Hillary Clinton in 2016. How vulnerable is he right now?
Oh, he's very vulnerable, Reena. His numbers are not good, although they've improved slightly in the last few months. All of the polling shows that the race is a dead heat or within 1 or 2 points. He really hurt himself this year with his inconstancy on the health care repeal of Obamacare. He was for it before he was against it, before he was for it again. But he got lucky because the president essentially came around and forced out a primary opponent, a very well-known guy named Danny Tarkanian, the son of the legendary basketball coach, or Heller would be in danger of losing tomorrow.
So, Jon, if Democrats want to take over the Senate and get the Senate majority in 2018, how important is this race and this defeat with Heller in November?
Well, I think they're really focusing on this race, Reena, because the map is not favorable to the Democrats. They have very vulnerable incumbents in other states. To be able to flip this seat would be a big deal for them in trying to take over the Senate. There are going to be tremendous resources spent here. You have the Senate Majority Project on the Democratic side announcing an $80 million spending spree in a bunch of states. A lot of that money is going to be spent here in Nevada. There's already been more than $10 million spent here on this race. Jackie Rosen, who is Dean Heller's opponent, is a first-time congresswoman who is running against Heller, and she is not that well known, which is why the race is so close despite Heller's numbers. And I just think that Heller and his allies as well are going to spend a ton of money trying to divine her right out of the box after tomorrow to try to keep the race within sight for the Republicans.
So there's also a close battle between Clark County Commission colleague Steve Sisolak and also Chris Giuliani, who goes by the name Chris G. They hope that each will to be Nevada's first Democratic governor in really 2 decades. Hillary Clinton endorsed Chris G. in a robocall was posted by the candidate's Twitter account Sunday. Do you think that Clinton can really put her over the top in Nevada's governor's race?
Well, first, kudos, Reena, for pronouncing Chris G's name
Thank you.
correctly.
I was a little bit nervous about that.
That is not an easy task. Listen, I think they would have rather have had that Hillary Clinton robocall for Chris Giuliani before early voting started. Early voting here in Nevada is 2 weeks before the primary. It's a big deal. As much as 60% or even maybe a little more of the vote is already in, so she can only affect now the voters who are going to vote Tuesday. And unless there's unusually high turnout, it won't affect nearly as many voters. Steve Sisolak has had the Democratic establishment behind him. He has had much more money than Chris Giuliani, 6 or 7 to 1 advantage, but she's been helped by Emily's List and by other outside groups who have spent some money, including the State Teachers Association. I still think Sisolak has a slight advantage, but it's going to be very low turnout, 25%. Probably, Reena. It's hard to predict what's going to happen with just a 25% turnout.
You know, that's the problem we always talk about with midterms is the lower turnout by voters. We were talking about earlier, a wave potentially of women like in 1992. And we were looking at a state as deep blue as California last week ahead of those primaries about how California, unfortunately, won't be helping with that wave necessarily. I'm curious about Nevada. Is there a deeper challenge for women candidates, especially for governor in the state there?
Well, there's never been a female governor. You've had women run and lose for governor, but they had problems that went beyond just getting women to turn out. 1998, it happened. 2006 happened. Very strong female candidates, but the male candidates had either institutional or structural advantages, or they had better campaigns. if this indeed is going to be a year of the woman, as you point out, like 1992, then I think Chris Giuliani not only has a chance in the primary, but perhaps in the general. The argument that the Democratic establishment has made is that she is not, as an unreconstructed liberal, the kind of candidate who can win in Nevada. But is this a different year here and elsewhere? The Republican nominee is going to be the Attorney General, Adam Laxalt, who is essentially not answered questions beyond superficial ones and has shown a lack of knowledge of the state because he's only lived here for a few years. There's an opportunity there, but I think the Democratic establishment here, it has nothing to do with gender, is just worried that she would be a weaker candidate in the general election because she is so unabashedly a liberal. That has never happened in this state. No unabashed liberal has been elected governor in this state in its history.
You know, I want to ask you about some of the policy issues. Immigration, health care, obviously two key issues in the state. How do you see them playing out, these two issues, ahead of the primary tomorrow?
I think there are big issues in this state. We talked briefly about Obamacare and then Heller's position earlier. Healthcare is a big deal in this state as it is elsewhere. We used to have one of the highest rate of uninsured folks in the country. It's been dramatically diminished, mostly by the Republican governor, Brian Sandoval, being the first Republican governor in the country to expand Medicaid. That has been a very contentious issue and will be much more in the general election. Immigration, even though we are not a border state, is a big deal here. More than a quarter of the population is Hispanic. The issue of so-called sanctuary cities and sanctuary state, both of which are misnomers but are political bludgeons, have become a big deal with some of the Republican candidates at the top of the ticket, including Heller and Laxalt, who I mentioned earlier.
It's going to be fascinating, John. Do you think it's going to be a late night for you?
I hope not, but I fear it will be.
Jon Ralston will be watching closely. John, thank you for joining us.